government of Madhya Pradesh.
Stock markets remain under pressure as Sensex and Nifty fail to hold opening gains. Banks and metal stocks lead the decline. Rupee weakens by nearly 30 paisa against the dollar. The World Economic Forum kicks off in Davos with fears of a global recession looming large. IMF says international relationships are worsening after decades, warns that economic fragmentation could cut global economic output by up to 7%. As the world's rich and powerful gather at Davos, Oxfam warns of widening inequality. A new report shows the richest 1% have amassed nearly two-thirds of all global wealth created since the pandemic. The top 1% of India's population owns more than 40% of the country's wealth. Union Law Minister Kiran Rijiju writes to the Chief Justice of India, Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, seeks a government representative in the collegium which appoints judges to higher courts. Opposition parties slammed the move, calling it a poison pill for an independent judiciary. Law Minister hits back, says his letter is in conformity with the observations and directions of the Supreme Court Constitution Bench. Wholesale price inflation in India falls below 5%, the slowest pace of growth in the last 22 years. Fall in food prices was the key driver. India's trade deficit in December remains largely flat at nearly $24 billion in December. Exports and imports rise on a monthly basis but decline on a yearly basis. Layoffs continue across startups. Dunzo fires 3% of its staff. ShareChat cuts 20% of its workforce. Rebel Foods lays off less than 2% of its employees. No interim relief for Google over penalties imposed by the Competition Commission of India. Supreme Court asks Google if the company is willing to adopt its European practices in India as well. This after CCI argued that Google is discriminating against Indian customers and is compliant with similar orders in Europe. Nepal observes a day of mourning after the worst aviation disaster in 3 decades killed 68 people. Investigators find the black box and cockpit voice recorder of the Yeti airline plane that crashed yesterday. Russia and Belarus begin joint air force drills, sparking fears of a new offensive in Ukraine. Western intelligence officials say Moscow could use its ally to launch a new ground campaign. This even as Russia continues to pound cities in eastern Ukraine. Viacom18 backs the rights to broadcast the inaugural edition of the Women's Premier League. Viacom18 will shell out nearly $117 million, which translates to more than 7 crore rupees for every match. Well, those are the headlines at this hour. Let me hand it over